Hi, boys and girls. Today it's a beach day, and I thought it'd be fun to read a story about seahorses. So this is Mr. Seahorse by Eric Carle. Mr. and Mrs. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Mrs. Seahorse began to wiggle and twist, this way and that. It's time for me to lay my eggs, she said. Can I help? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Oh, yes, thank you, said Mrs. Seahorse. And she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. I'll take good care of our eggs, said Mr. Seahorse. I promise. The seahorse is one of the very few animals where the male carries the babies. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a group of trumpetfish hidden in a patch of reeds. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Stickleback? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Delighted, replied Mr. Stickleback. I just built a nest right away. Mrs. Stickleback laid her eggs into it. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch. Here's another daddy who's taking care of the eggs. Keep up the good work, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by, look at the reeds, a lionfish hidden behind a coral reef. Oh, the lionfish. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Tilapia? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Mr. Tilapia couldn't answer. His mouth was full of eggs. Oh, my goodness. I didn't know there were this many daddy fish that helped with the eggs. I know, said Mr. Seahorse. Mrs. Tilapia laid her eggs. Now you are taking good care of them until they hatch. Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. You must be very happy, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a pair of leaf fish hidden among the seaweed. Look at that. We see them in the seaweed. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Curtis? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Pretty fine, replied Mr. Curtis. Mrs. Curtis laid her eggs, and I have stuck them on my head. Now I am taking good care of them until they hatch. Look at that. The eggs are on his head. That is so silly. You are doing a good job, Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a stonefish hidden behind a rock. Look at that stonefish. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Pipe? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Couldn't be better, replied Mr. Pipe. Mrs. Pipe laid her eggs along my belly, and now I am taking good care of them until they hatch. You should feel pretty proud of yourself, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on my belly. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Bullhead? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Tip-top, replied Mr. Bullhead. Mrs. Bullhead laid her eggs, and the eggs hatched. Now I'm babysitting. You are doing a fine job, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. Look at all the baby fish swimming around the daddy bullhead fish. The time had come for the seahorse babies to be born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted this way and that. At last the babies tumbled down from Mr. Seahorse's pouch and swam away. One baby turned around and tried to come back into the pouch. Oh, no, said Mr. Seahorse. I do love you, but now you are ready to be on your own. Look at all the babies swimming out of the pouch. It's kind of like a kangaroo pouch. The end. And at the very back of the book, it says, Dear friends, in most fish families, after the mother has laid the eggs, they're left on their own. But there are exceptions, such as the seahorse, stickleback, catfish, pipefish, tilapia, Curtis nursery fish, bullhead, and some others. Not only are the eggs cared for by a parent, but surprise, the parent is a father. This is my story about them. Such good information. I hope you enjoyed reading Mr. Seahorse with me by Eric Carle. Thanks for reading.